Hey fans, this episode is Silk Stockings, the Widow's Proposition. Now this is another story that goes down quite a rabbit hole, as you will see as we go through it. But before we get started, take a quick second and hit the subscribe button, as new videos and stories are dropping soon. Anyway, let's dive right in, so here we go. Charles Raymond Goddard was born in Southwick, Massachusetts on March 25th, 1888. In 1909, he was 21 years old and attending Yale Law School, which he helped pay for by being a door-to-door salesman selling women's hosiery. In Hartford, Connecticut, he knocked on the widow Treat's door. The wealthy widow did not buy any of his products, but instead, she presented him with a surprising proposition, one he couldn't easily refuse. Charles obtained a marriage license August 24th, and he and the widow Treat wed on September 1st, with the bride wearing a thick veil. Now, the widow Treat, her name was Lucinda. She had a son. His name was Edwin. He was old enough to be Charles's father. Edwin learned about his mother's marriage to Charles in his local newspaper, and he was less than pleased. On September 9th, he petitioned a court to appoint a conservator to his mother's vast estate, claiming that Charles was after his mother's money. Charles and his new bride received a court summons regarding the conservatorship. Meanwhile, a prosecutor who wanted Charles to answer perjury charges had a warrant issued for his arrest, because at the time of his marriage application, Charles swore to the clerk at the Marriage License Bureau that his new bride was 36, when in reality she would be turning 70 in October. Police took Charles into custody at his wife's home on September 17th. At the police station, Lucinda tried posting her husband's $1,000 bond, but no matter how much she pleaded, the police refused to accept it, citing general principles. When Charles appeared in police court on October 7th, the judge found probable cause, and he was bound over to the next session of Superior Court. On October 18th, Charles and Lucinda appeared in probate court in Hartford. During that trial, several men testified that Lucinda wanted to marry them. Others told the court that she had a thing for young men. And after the death of her husband, she started dressing inappropriately for her age, incorporating lace and ribbon with low necks and short sleeves to appear much more youthful. Now, this may not sound like a big deal because of the way people dress today, but back in this time period, this was a very, very big deal. Anyways, I also saw Lucinda began wearing lots of makeup, so much in fact that they could not help but take notice, and people in the streets gossiped and ridiculed the aged woman for it behind her back. One witness, a streetcar conductor named Charles Thrall, told the court that when the widow Treat rode his car, she had so much powder on her face that when she scratched her cheek, her fingers left furrows in the powder. It was very embarrassing testimony put on display in open court. But on the bright side, a revolving door of folks vouched for Lucinda, saying she was actually a really shrewd businesswoman. One witness, Reverend Dr. William Love, now he was the clergyman who married Charles and Lucinda, he complimented Lucinda, saying he didn't know if she was 36 or twice that. However, when pressed further, Reverend Love said he could not see her face, and that he would not have married the couple had he known the vast age discrepancy. The trial was postponed for about a week, but the conservatorship trial resumed on November 1st, and the judge gave his initial opinion on the 3rd, stating that the elderly woman had shown no incapacity for handling her business affairs. The judge's final decision came a day later, and it surprised those in attendance when he did a complete 360 and appointed the Connecticut Trust and Safe Deposit Company as conservator. Lucinda appealed. With the conservatorship case in appeal, Charles was still facing the separate perjury charge for lying on the marriage license application. But on December 8th, for reasons unknown, the Connecticut State Attorney dismissed a perjury complaint against him. Following the conservatorship appeal trial, a Superior Court judge rendered his verdict. In a lengthy decision published on June 15, 1910, the judge discredited two witnesses as unbelievable and praised Charles as capable, industrious, and prudent. The judge also noted that the couple was living happily together, and the judge dismissed the conservatorship to the dismay of Edwin, who refused to back down. However, all of Edwin's attempts at appeal, including one to the Connecticut Supreme Court of Errors, were unsuccessful. So Charles continued law school. He passed the exam and was admitted to the bar on June 21st, 1911. And sadly, on November 3rd, 1913, Lucinda died. She left 2/3 of her estate to her son and $7,500 to Charles. A lot of money in 1913. Now, you would think that would be the end of the story, but not so fast. In 1920, Charles moved to Washington, D.C. and went to work for the Department of Interior before becoming an IRS employee. He remarried in 1922, and he and his wife Pearl welcomed 3 children. Sadly, their son Charles Jr. died in 1931, and Pearl, Charles' second wife, died in 1945. And just to note, Edwin Treat died in 1946. And once again, you think that would be the end of the story, but not yet, because on November 30th, 1951, the Treasury Department decided that IRS employees should file periodic financial statements. And in doing so, Charles listed more than $100,000 in cash, an enormous sum of money back then, and that raised huge flags and prompted an investigation into his 1948, 1949, 1950 income tax returns. Twice widowed, Charles married a third time, this time to his childhood sweetheart, Clara Sanders of Rocky Hill, Connecticut. Now, their relationship dates back to 1915. Clara reached out to Charles in 1951, and within 2 hours of reuniting, they had sex. Now, that's a seemingly minor detail, but an important one nonetheless. Anyway, Charles and Clara wed on May 19th, 1952. However, Clara left him after a one-day honeymoon, and Charles filed for divorce on grounds that Clara was a gold digger. She filed a cross-complaint citing intolerable cruelty. In court in 1953, Charles presented evidence, the most damaging being a letter he found from Clara to a son from her first marriage. In the letter dated May 21st, 1952, Clara shares her dastardly plan to relieve Charles of his money. More letters were introduced into evidence by attorneys, including one Clara wrote Charles on June 8, 1952. She addresses the letter to the man who puts love first and suggests that Charles splits his estate and income with her, writing in part, "All of the men I have ever known have handed over their income intact to their wives." Now, it's interesting to note that the judge in the case was a classmate of Charles at Yale in 1911. The judge offered to excuse himself, but the attorneys felt he could preside over it without prejudice, and he continued. It's also interesting to note that an undated pre-marriage letter references Queen Elizabeth's upcoming coronation. Now, Queen Elizabeth was crowned on June 2nd, 1953. Anyways, in the letter, signed by Briars and Brambles, the writer asked Clara when she would be his queen. On the stand, Charles likened Clara to incurable cancer, portraying himself as a surgeon trying to kill something that just wouldn't die. Charles explains that he is Briars and Brambles, and he signs his letters as such in response to Clara's coldness and hard treatment towards him. Betrayal and heartbreak took their toll on Charles's mental health, which was already suffering greatly from the stress of the long, drawn-out IRS investigation. He withdrew socially, and it's unclear, but he either retired or resigned from the IRS. So the United States Tax Court issued its opinion surrounding Charles's taxes on April 15, 1962. How ironic. In it, the court called Charles an eccentric miser. And the court ruled that he would owe no tax on a secret payment Lucinda Treat paid him decades ago to marry her, $100,000 up front and another $100,000 later. At the time of the court case, Charles still had every cent of the $100,000 payment his much older wife gave him. He even went into debt purchasing real estate. It's unclear if Lucinda ever paid him the additional $100,000 or if he refused to accept it. Anyway, the court cleared Charles a fraud, saying he hid the money and refused to spend it because he was deeply ashamed of the transaction. You can read Silk Stockings, the widow's proposition on the Southwick Time Machine's website at www.southwicktimemachine.com. The complete story is there, as are any edited out portions and the author's additional research notes. Let me know what you think of the story by dropping a comment below. It's reader feedback and interaction that keeps the Southwick Time Machine going. Who knows where we'll go next, so stay tuned for more historical curiosities as we continue our mission of preserving history through storytelling. Until next time, thanks for watching.